Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, November 19th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, New York Times opinion writer, or I should say opinion columnist, New York Times, co-host of the Unclear and Present Danger podcast, Jamelle Bouie, will be here with us. And then, making her triumphant return to the Majority Report, Jamie Peck will be joining us, along with her co-host Jorge. The podcast Everybody Loves Communism be joining us later in the program. Also on the program today, just moments ago, the House passed a $1.75 trillion Build Back Better bill, 220 to 213, one Democrat voting against because of the obscene tax cuts that are there under the guise of the state and local tax deduction. Meanwhile, Senate to vote on the national defense budget. And of course, they'll also eventually get that Build Back Better bill, and maybe they'll destroy it. Republicans attack nominated bank regulator as a commie because she has an accent. Also, the defense rests in the Arbery case. The jury in day 4 deliberation in the Rittenhouse case. Meanwhile, Oklahoma governor commutes Julius Jones' death penalty. Keeps him in life, in prison for life, without any parole. Still no pick on the Fed chair from Joe Biden. Meanwhile, the FDA authorizes boosters for all adults across the country, as Austria becomes the first country to impose a universal vaccine mandate. In India, Modi bows to massive protests, repeals the farm laws. And lastly, Apple to sell parts and tools, allowing for a right of repair on its phones and computers.
Thank you very much, Tim Apple.
All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Emma is she's actually out for today and for Monday. Different reasons came up. All is well with her, but she will not be with us today or Monday. In the meantime, Matt and Bradley are here. And just wanted to, before we get into things, read this. Hey all, Sam, you forgot to mention 2 guests that will be at the Boston show. Teacher Lauren and her fantastic carpenter husband, whose name also happens to be Sam. Can't wait to see you all, says Lauren. You know, and it occurred to me, I know they're coming from upstate New York. That's a bit of a haul. Do we have a sense? Do we know? Over the next couple of days, send us an email if you think that you are coming from the furthest destination to the show. The show, of course, as you know, on the anniversary of January 16th. So it's on January 16th. And part of our big live tour
The Big Live.
The Big Live tour. January 16th. You can get tickets now at majoritylive.com or majorityreportlive.com because I know how to work a URL, ladies and gentlemen. Check it out. We were planning on announcing some, who's going to be there, but we'll probably do it after Thanksgiving. So check that out. I should also say, apparently like 2 days ago was the 11th anniversary of the hard launch of the show. And we missed the soft launch. We totally blew through that.
Well, since we missed the 10th, I feel like missing the 11th was probably to be expected.
We didn't miss the 10th.
Didn't we?
We knew it was happening. We just thought we were going to do a live show then.
Oh, okay.
We were going to do the 24-hour or the 12-hour live show. And then, the pandemic hit. So this is what's happening on January 16th is in many respects the 10-year anniversary of the show, 11 and a half years into it. So you can check that out. But thank you for all the kind words on Twitter. Maybe we will do like a little bit of an anniversary thing at the big show, just to play that out. Yeah, we'll do it live or something. I don't know. The pictures, that we had very little video at that time, and the set was not nearly as impressive as it is now.
No.
I mean, totally different set of paneling. Right now, there's hearings in the Senate, or I should say yesterday, the Office of the Controller of the Currency, Comptroller. This is a big bank regulator position. And apparently the banks are a little bit concerned about Biden's nominee, Saul Omarova. And she was born, I guess, in what was then the Soviet Union. And apparently, this has got people very scared. Here is Senator John Kennedy. Well, it's not the fact that she was born in the Soviet Union that's actually got them scared. It's that
maybe the type of person born from Soviet Union that they're worried about.
I think they're more worried that she just seems to, believe that there should be some tight regulations on banks, period. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, there's nothing particularly radical here about that. But they are attempting to paint her as a radical. And here is John Kennedy, Senator John Kennedy, from Louisiana, doing it in what I think you could probably call a ham-fisted way.
I don't mean any disrespect. I don't know whether to call you professor or comrade. Oh, my goodness.
Senator.
Pause it. Did you hear that? Did you hear, like, I don't know if it was a senator or whoever was just like, oh, my God, are you... Like that, oh my goodness, is the functional equivalent. You got to be fucking kidding me. What I would like her to say is like, wait, do you consider me your comrade? Just start from the beginning. I mean, it really is so shocking that it's like this childish.
I don't mean any disrespect. I don't know whether to call you professor or comrade.
Senator.
Oh my God.
I'm not a communist. I do not subscribe to that ideology. I could not choose where I was born. I do not remember joining any Facebook group that subscribes to that ideology. I would never knowingly join any such group. There is no record of me ever actually participating in any Marxist or communist discussions of any kind. My family suffered under the communist regime. I grew up without knowing half of my family. My grandmother herself escaped death twice under the Stalin regime. This is what's seared in my mind. That's who I am. I remember that history. I came to this country. I'm proud to be an American. And this is why I'm here today, Senator. I'm here today because I'm ready for public service.
I mean, if anything is going to help her get past those people who don't want any type of regulations on banks to be executed, that's actually going to help. I mean, that is just so ridiculous. Now, one can only imagine how many of those people who were so concerned about the new Cold War that we were having, I'm sure they are screaming from the rooftops now about how repulsive what Senator Kennedy did. That is just impressive. Like, I mean, who is it? Like, what for old people is that for?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like also, I mean, well, let's make it a political liability to have a structural understanding of capitalism. Like it's the 1940s or 30s again.
Well, I mean, also, she has an accent. So, folks, today's episode sponsored by Sunset Lake CBD.com. Oh, I forgot the sign again. Darn it. Here it is. In anticipation of Black Friday, Sunset Lake CBD contacted us and was like, we want to figure out how we can donate a portion of our sales over the next couple of weeks to a good organization. And one of my personal favorite charities is Give Directly. They give money directly to people living in extreme poverty and basically trust people to know where the most efficient place for them to expend these funds are. All the academic research shows that this is the most effective way of fighting extreme poverty. Anyways, so sunsetlakecbd.com and the Majority Report teaming up to turn that incredibly, consumerist Black Friday into a fundraising opportunity for Give Directly. And here's how it works. If you visit sunsetlakecbd.com starting November 22nd, so that's over this weekend, right? What is that? Is that Monday or Sunday? 21st, Monday. Starting Monday, all CBD products will be between 30 and 60% off. 30 to 60% off. Orders over $100 will receive a free jar of their delicious CBD gummies. Be careful with those. Be careful with those. That's a $40 value. It's for free. You don't need a promo code. All the products are going to be discounted on the website. Talked about these guys, this company, both in terms of their business and their agricultural product practices. And the tincture basically allows me to get to sleep without having to take that Ambien that destroyed my brain. But the smokables, the fudge, the coffee, great gifts. Hand cream and the salve. So Sunset Lake CBD will donate 10% of sales to GiveDirectly.org. Like I say, this is an international anti-poverty organization. It sends cash directly to people living in extreme poverty to allow them to choose themselves how to spend the money with a certain amount of dignity and in a way that makes most sense for them. And here's what we're going to do at the Majority Report. We're going to match that 10% donation. So they do $100,000 worth of sales over at sunsetlakecbd.com, and I don't know how much they do. We're going to give $10,000 and match their $10,000. sunsetlakecbd.com, as you know, a majority employee-owned business. They have donated over $16,000 this year to anti-drug war organizations, to animal shelters, union strike funds, conservation efforts, food shelves, and refugee resettlement organizations. Again, visit sunsetlakecbd.com. Take advantage of these discounts and help Majority Report raise money for a great organization. The sale ends December 1st. So there's going to be about 9 days starting on Monday, the 22nd. Also, Emma's going to be sad she missed this one. Give a gift that keeps on giving. this Hanukkah or Christmas or Kwanzaa or just, I don't know, equinox or a New Year's gift, somebody's birthday, it's the Hello Tushy bidet. It's a great gift because if people are bidet curious, they may not realize that the Hello Tushy bidet is, well, you're going to give it to them as a gift. You know, you're not going to tell them like it wasn't nearly as expensive as you thought, but it's super easy to install. You don't need any new plumbing. You don't need any electricity. You can do it in about 8 minutes. The Hello Tushy bidet cleans your butt in a far more efficient and frankly civilized way than wiping. It cuts toilet paper use down by 80%. You wash your bum with a fresh water. You just spray and then you pat dry. The complete Tushy system they have turns your restroom into the best room, as they like to say. With the Tushy bidet attachment, you got the ottoman. They have a toilet brush, the Tushy stand, and tissues. Join the millions of happy butts falling in love with Hello Tushy. Folks, honestly, you want to change your life and do so without having to expend an enormous amount of money? This is the way. I mean, most of us, every day, it really is life-changing. Give the gift of a clean bum to yourself or to your loved ones this holiday season. Get a 10% off plus free shipping right now at hellotushy.com/majority. That's hellotushy.com/majority for 10% off and free shipping. And don't forget to tag Hello Tushy on social to celebrate your clean bum. Why wouldn't you celebrate it? All right. Want to take just a moment so we can have a period of time between the bidet and our guest. Want to bring onto the program New York Times opinion columnist and co-host of the Unclear and Present Danger podcast, Jamelle Bouie. Welcome to the program, Jamelle.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I haven't listened to your new podcast yet, but it sounds awesome because I got to say that like those type of movies, huge sort of soft spot for me back in the day. They were all like UHF style movies before we had, and that's sort of my thing. I got to say.
No, I mean, we're both, me and John Gans, who is my co-host, we're both interested in the movies and we like them sincerely, but it's also the case that just in terms of trying to find an audience, sort of pitching for this particular genre of film, which has a lot of fans and people think of them very, with a lot of sentiment, was a strategic choice. I think people.
Well, we should tell people is it exclusively from the 90s or are they? Okay, so just from the 90s, and how would you call them? Like international thrillers? What would you?
We think of them as sort of political and military thrillers, and we're thinking kind of broadly here. And so most of them are directly related to kind of international relations. So the first episode is Hunt for Red October. We have the Patriot Games episode. Our next episode is Clear and Present Danger. And then we'll kind of go back to the beginning of the decade and kind of move chronologically. We intend to do movies like Crimson Tide and Ronin and The Siege and so on and so forth. But there's also a lot of
people
movies.
Know my Ronin. Like I've talked about Ronin. I mean, I like the Frankenheimer's car chase stuff, but you can't go back and do the French Connection. You can't.
No. So we're gonna the 90s. That's a hard limit, but within that, there's a lot of different stuff you can do that kind of broadly touches on the theme. So Goldeneye, I think, touches on the theme. A movie like Falling Down, starring Michael Douglas, touches on the theme. So there's room for maneuvering in there, but the main idea is that we're going to cover these movies with an eye towards really trying to think through the politics of the 90s and kind of maybe historicize the decade for listeners.
All right. Well, if you ever go out of the 90s, start with like 3 Days of the Condor, because that's also another one. All right. Let's move on to I guess the big news, and I want to work backwards, I guess, from today. The Build Back Better bill passed last night, or no, this morning, I should say. Last night, Kevin McCarthy I am not quite clear on what he did. What is he spoke all night, and it seemed to me, I don't know if he thought like, oh, they're going to have to take the vote at like 2 a.m. and I'm going to get, it's going to make it seem like the Democrats didn't want people to know that they passed this, or if it was more like, I need to shore up my chances of becoming majority leader when the Republicans take over in the midterms. What was your sense of like what McCarthy was doing? And then we'll talk about the bill itself.
I think you had it with that latter point. I think McCarthy just wants to, it's not a given that McCarthy is going to be Speaker of the House next year if Republicans win the House. And so I think he's trying to present himself as someone who's going to stand up against Democrats and resist Democrats as much as possible. I want to make the quick point that, McCarthy could speak for so long because House leadership, even if they're only allocated a minute to speak, have basically unlimited speaking privileges. And so he kind of took advantage of that to speak for 8 hours and 30 minutes or so. And then he stopped. Like, he obviously couldn't go on for much longer, so he stopped. And I think that maybe gives us an illustration what the return to the talking filibuster in the Senate might look like if it ever happens, right? That you can delay a vote as long as you want, as long as you're able to keep the floor. But once you're no longer able to keep the floor, that's the end of the ball game.
And we should say, relative to people in the Senate, we just played a clip of Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana, and I feel like he could probably, if he had to stand up and talk, I feel like maybe 45 minutes.
Right.
Maybe 45 minutes.
It's not clear to me that anyone really has or too many people have the stamina to talk for 12 hours or 16 hours or 24 hours to delay a vote versus the current system now where you can just send an email and say that you want to invoke cloture or you want to require a cloture vote.
And I should say, like, I think that element of the conversation could get more this could become more relevant once we get past the Build Back Better bill, the debt ceiling, the budget. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure to reform the filibuster, at least in the context of voting. And you wrote a little bit about that this past week. But before we get to that, let's just talk about the Build Back Better bill. The biggest expenditure, as far as I can tell, or one of the biggest expenditures in the bill, is not universal pre-K. It is not child care. It's not the tax credit. It is the expansion of the limit on what you can deduct from your taxes in the state and local taxes. This was the only decent thing, as far as I could tell, in terms of like the Trump tax bill, was to basically say, like, there was some talk that this is going to put pressure on some states, California, New York, New Jersey, to raise their taxes or to drop their taxes and cut services. But I don't think that's borne out, frankly. And it turns out that super wealthy people can afford to pay their taxes and don't want to move to some other state because they have to pay taxes. Give me your sense of like how relevant that is within the context of the bill. Is it, I get a sense of what it tells us about what's wrong with our politics, but just your sense on that.
Yeah, it's clearly there to get the votes of a handful of conservative Democrats, especially conservative Democrats in New Jersey and the states where this is most relevant, to get their votes and get them to sign on. It's also clear that in the Senate, which now that this bill is passed, it's going to go to the Senate, and the Senate is going to have its hands on it, that powerful Senate Democrats like Bernie Sanders are very unhappy with the expansion of the SALT deduction. So my sense is that this may end up being a real area of contention, and I would hope, my personal preference here is for that deduction, if not to be removed entirely, which is probably not going to happen for these political reasons, but at least sort of like scaled down quite a bit before it goes back to the House, before it goes for the final conference vote in both chambers. That would be my preference. But It is. I mean, it does speak to, I think, one of the challenges Democrats have, which is their coalition now includes a whole bunch of affluent suburbanites. And this is the kind of thing that affluent suburbanites, this kind of thing that they like, even if it is sort of, I think, antithetical to a big tax cut for rich people who own like multiple homes, right? Like is antithetical to what the Democratic Party is supposed to stand for. But the fact that it includes, the party coalition now includes all of these affluent suburbanites and their representatives, kind of makes it a challenge, makes it a struggle. We'll see if those conservative Democrats are basically willing to compromise on their tax cuts to get a big spending priority for the president through.
I mean, does Joe Manchin care about it? I mean, I guess like this is like, it seems to me, I mean, I find it just grotesque, frankly, that, this, it just seems so like miserly and greedy. I mean, it really just does. And that Gottheimer just has, I don't know, 20 or 30 donors in his district who are at whatever you reverse engineer, whatever, it takes for them to be paying $80,000 in state and local taxes. The reverse engineer at whatever they're making annually, I don't know, $600,000-$700 a year. Who knows what it is? It just seems, but in the long and short of it, I'd like to see us, go back and institute the billionaires tax and do a wealth tax and just across the board tax raises. I don't care about the specific deduction in and of itself. If the package was bigger, it seems to me, would be a fair trade. But does Joe Manchin care about that? That seems to be the problem. Like if this was a sop to Joe Manchin and he was going to sign on to at least the 1.75, which again, a big, a significant chunk of that 1.75 is just tax deduction, tax break for very targeted wealthy people. It seems to me that it would be okay, at least in terms of like, we're going to have to come back and raise taxes on people at one point anyways, just to keep them from having that much money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Joe Manchin cares about this particular tax cut, right? He does care about the attempted wealth taxes and billionaire taxes, I think, for similarly sort of like venal reasons, his connection to kind of the donor class. But as far as like West Virginians go, right, so the most relevant part of the 2017 tax bill, the Trump tax bill, was to double the standard deduction. And so for most of his constituents, that's the benefit. And there's not really anyone, the number of West Virginians who benefit from who would benefit from this change in the deduction, in the SALT deduction, has to be vanishingly small. Like it can't really matter that much because West Virginia is itself a low tax, low service state. So I don't know if he necessarily cares about this. If he does have like a top line number that he's not going to go over, let's say he's just not going to go over 1.75 trillion or 1.5 trillion, reducing the SALT deduction would be the kind of thing that could like get you past that number without really taking an axe at any of the programs within the bill. But I feel like that's the big unanswered question as this goes towards the Senate, is like, what exactly do Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, what do they want and what don't they want? It's unclear to me. The House seems to have produced a package that by itself, I think maybe could get past those two, but it's, for my part, totally unclear to me what they would prefer to see or what they would like to nix from the package as it exists.
It feels to me like Sinema she's gotten everything she didn't want out of the bill in terms of like, cheaper prescription drugs across the board. And that Manchin just doesn't want the bill. But it also feels like he's sort of run out of, fake excuses. With all those analysts coming out the other day and saying this is not going to add to inflation. Who does he pretend to listen to? Is it Larry Summers going to come around and say like, well, I'm personally explaining to Joe Manchin that he shouldn't. What does Joe Manchin say at this point? It feels like he's run out of maybe you can come up with another one. Like, I don't want any bills that have 3 B's in them. Like, we got to stop, get away from these things that are so alliterative. Or what does he say?
I mean, I don't know. It's Manchin has been all over the place in a lot of ways, right? Like, first he said, or last month he said, I don't think we should work on a reconciliation bill this year. But just, I think a couple of days ago, he said, oh, we can work on a reconciliation bill this year. I mean, I think my read on Manchin so far is that there are substantive things he does not want to see, right? He wanted this bill to be much smaller than the original proposal. He is skeptical of things like paid leave, of kind of like unqualified benefits to ordinary people. But once you get past that stuff, once you've either been persuaded or you've made concessions, my sense is that he doesn't want to actually tank Biden's presidency. I don't think he necessarily has an interest in trying to, make Biden's presidency the best thing it could be. But I don't think he wants to see Biden, crash and burn, because that if he decides to run for re-election, that will harm his chances as well. And so at this point, I'm sure he'll make additional cuts. I'm sure Sinema will. But I kind of think they're both going to end up being votes for this package, especially, you're seeing today how much positive press the House Democrats have gotten, the Democrats have gotten for passing the Build Back Better bill in the House. And I think that's going to influence their tactical decision of whether they're going to support a final package. I think that if it's late December, it's right before Christmas, and Democrats have passed, passed a $1.8 trillion relief bill. They passed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill, and they passed a $1.5 trillion kind of social policy bill. That's a good record to have for a first year in office. And I think even Manchin and Sinema are going to want to be able to run on and tout that record going into next year and beyond.
So let's talk about that, and I want to sort of slide into a couple of the pieces that you've written in the past couple of weeks, both about structural racism and about you have a theory as to one way in which we could deal with the voting restrictions that we're seeing across the country. So let's just start with that with the voting, and then move into the structural racism piece. Right now, it looks like, just based upon what we know in terms of the changes to redistricting, that all things being equal, Republicans, under the plans that have been presented so far, coming out of Ohio and in Wisconsin, they're trying to, I don't know how they could do it anymore in Wisconsin, frankly, but and in Texas and in North Carolina, maybe I'm missing a couple of states. Republicans have already picked up, based upon the votes from 2020, they've already picked up the 5 seats or so swing that they need at this point. And which is, seems a little problematic that they've already taken control of the House without anybody changing a vote. The polling numbers for the Democrats right now really stinks. Martin Longman, who's Washington Monthly, I don't know if he wrote this piece at the Washington Monthly, but basically said, just wrote a piece that basically says, there's a real problem. That the polling shows this. And then I got another piece, there's a lot of evidence that passing these bills one way or another, regardless of what their size would be, doesn't necessarily end up benefiting politicians. It's the absence of their, not passing anything is helpful, but the actual act of passing it in and of itself doesn't. So where are we in terms of how messed up our democracy, even our democracy is?
I mean, it's sort of inherent in the fact that we do districts by geography, right? We draw borders over discrete geographical areas and assign representation to those areas. Inherent in that is just going to be shenanigans. There's sort of no way to avoid it, right? The term gerrymandering was coined in the 19th century, very early on. It's just part of the game. And so even if the Republican Party in this moment weren't, radicalizing itself against electoral democracy, even if things were a bit more calm and chill in American politics than they are now, you'd still have this basic issue of the politicians essentially being able to, I mean, this is a cliche, but choose their voters and sort of use the drawing of boundaries to win political victories that they couldn't win or wouldn't necessarily win by winning votes. And I think when you combine all of that with, with the fact that we know that incumbents have a huge advantage running for re-election, we know that elections are very expensive and to require tons of money, which kind of locks out lots of different kinds of people from running. When you combine that with all of these structural factors that kind of impose a level of stasis on American politics, I think what you end up having is a situation like the one we have now, where once Republicans are able to do this, they might be locked into power in the House for the next 10 years, right? I don't think it's going to be permanent, but 10 years is a long time for a party to be able to hold power, not on the basis of consistently winning the most votes, but simply on the basis of consistently having the right voters in the right places at the right times. I wrote this column that is about a clause of the Constitution that no one really talks about called the Guarantee Clause, which says that the United States shall guarantee to each state a Republican form of government. No one's ever really defined what this actually means, but there's a plausible reading of the clause that says that things like hyperpartisan gerrymandering, sort of a lot of the shenanigans we see on the state level with regards to voting, are themselves violations of the Guarantee Clause because they take away people's right to choose a government that represents them, take away sort of the basic assumption of majority rules, which underpins, I think, American democracy. And so, the column doesn't go any further than that, than just saying there's this kind of weirdly powerful, if neglected clause in the Constitution that you could use for all sorts of things. But if we're thinking practically, right, like one thing you could use it for if you're Congress is as justification for getting rid of single member districts, of boundary based representation, and imposing on the country what political scientists call multiple member districts. Where I live in Virginia, instead of Virginia having 13 separate districts, Virginia itself, which is one big district, and there are 13 seats to fill. You use ranked choice voting, you use some system so that you vote and you fill those seats without anyone being able to control which voters are going to participate and where.
But isn't that, I mean, this is the dilemma, right? And with like basically an at-large type of situation, like you're talking about, that really benefits money in a way that, like a smaller district may not. Now, we may be past that at this point, where it's just like there's so much money that it's like a marginal difference. And the value of that is that everybody gets an equal vote. I mean, and we should say to people, like you say, gerrymandering's been around for a couple of hundred years, but technology has allowed it in such a way that it is almost qualitatively different because of the quantitative difference here. Like, and Wisconsin is just a perfect example where it's like Democrats win 53% of the vote for state senators or assemblymen, and yet they only have 35% of the seats. I mean, that's fairly obvious that it's problematic, because you're basically saying that for a certain cohort of people, their vote is just simply not worth what another person's vote is, and that's determined by the state house. So that we're at a qualitative thing, and I hope you're right that it's not permanent. 10 years out. I mean, I guess there could be enough changes and things could change, but that's a huge bar to have to win 60% of the vote to get 50% of the representation. That's nuts.
Right. I mean, I think that's where something like the Guarantee Clause comes in, because I think that plainly kind of like cuts against the idea of it being a Republican lowercase r government, sort of a fairly representative government. I wanted to say to this like money question, right? Sort of, I always see this as, I think either any way you do any way you arrange, how you elect representatives, it's going to involve, in the absence of like radical changes to campaign finance and like constitutional changes of that, it's going to involve a lot of money. And the question isn't so much how much, but like where it's coming from, right? And so one, depending on where you are, this is advantage, disadvantage. If you're running in like a singular district, there's gonna be a lot of money flowing in. It's likely to be a lot of money flowing in from sort of like the local, oligarch is too strong of a word, but sort of like local rich guy class, the local class people who owns the car dealerships and the fast food franchises and so on and so forth. And there's not really going to be a countervailing force there. It's going to be difficult to build up the kind of countervailing force, as sort of like a clique of guys who they're, with $20 million in assets who can donate $500,000 to a political campaign, which is enough for their preferred candidate to if not run a competitive race, and win outright. Whereas, and we see this right in statewide elections, we see this in national elections, simply enlarging the pool of potential donors makes it much easier for candidates who represent, represent different kinds of groups, different kinds of people, to raise the money to compete. And I think that's an underrated thing, right? Like, it's possible to raise enough money to compete from small donors. We know this. We've seen it again and again and again. And enlarging the field of play, I think, plays to that benefit. It introduces something of a countervailing force.
All right, let's move on to another piece that you wrote recently. I'm going to spare you. We'll probably play it later in the program. A clip from Jordan Peterson, who you may or may not be familiar with, but he was I guess he was on some panel talking about racism. I thought it was just sort of like a perfect example of where we are with our politics in this country right now, even though he's from Canada, where he was bemoaning the idea of even the existence of structural racism, and then was like air quoting just like the idea of racism. He said it's like individual instances of people who have a racial bias. And when we talk about anything that's like broader than that, that it's so imprecise that it's meaningless. There is a big push, it seems to me, right now in this country, and maybe it's actually, there's always a big push. It's just like at different times it comes up and it's just sort of dressed up differently, to deny the racism that is embedded and intertwined and sort of like stitched through our society in some way. And we see this in the context of, critical race theory, people bemoaning it's being taught in elementary school. And I mean, I don't think it would be a bad thing if we did that. I just don't think that frankly, I just don't think that, some of these kids are going to pick up on it at that age. It's a little bit, but you wrote a piece that also is in some ways a critique of some of the anti-racist, I guess, I don't know if I would call it doctrine or movement in this country, and that it's sort of missing the point. And in some ways, it's more aligned with what Jordan Peterson is saying, that that structural racism in the country is in many respects married to capitalism and is not about exclusively or even primarily about the disposition of individuals towards black people or people of color at large.
Right. I mean, I would say that my view is probably the exact opposite of Jordan Peterson's. I think you're right to see in there a critique of kind of the excessive focus on language, like this idea that if we can kind of cleanse our souls, then there will somehow be some profound transformation in society. Because I don't think that's the case. I think that the best way to understand what exactly racism is to think of it as sort of a part of kind of the structures, the institutions, whatever, that kind of form modern Western society, that if capitalism needs inequality to work, if that's sort of part of the bundle of forces it needs to work, then racism is one of the ways in which our society has sort of determined who's going to be on what end of that inequality. It's the force that says who can be dispossessed, who can be expropriated, who can have differential rights of citizenship that allow them, that make them more vulnerable to those forces. And so, someone like Jordan Peterson is like, well, this stuff doesn't even exist. I think it's nonsense. I think you can see it in law. I think you can see it in sort of the structure of the economy, that these forces very plainly exist, right? That at the turn of the 20th century, most African Americans in the country were poor sharecroppers and were subject to kind of horrific levels of vigilante violence without any protection of law, and that this wasn't simply the product of people with mean thoughts in their hearts. It was for the specific reason of powerful landowners and planters needed a pliable, low-wage labor force to enable production, right? And so that's a structural thing, right? Sort of that there is the owners of capital in that society, in the post-Civil War, post-Reconstruction South, needed a group of people to do low-wage labor. And American history, our history of slavery, the aftermath of Reconstruction, the extent to which Black Americans were associated with servitude and subservience, racism provided basically the structure, the structural force for determining who is going to fill that role. And you can understand some of the labor struggles of that period and afterwards, as classes of white workers in the South, for example, realizing that they are in a uncomfortably close position to that and trying to struggle out of it. And it's out of sort of that struggle and out of some of those white workers recognizing that they're in a similar position with Black workers and kind of potential for interracial coalition, all these things. But that to my mind is the function racism serves. I think you can see that in the present, right? That deindustrialization in the 70s and 80s, the rise of finance capitalism, the massive dislocation of working people in the 80s and the early 90s creates like basically a big surplus population of people who cannot work. And one thing that racism as a structural force does is provide the context for shoving some of those people into the prison system, right? Sort of like incarcerating some number of those dislocated workers, disproportionately Black, disproportionately men, to deal with this problem of surplus population, surplus labor. So, if you put me and Jordan Peterson on a spectrum here, I probably hold the exact opposite view of him. But I think, like I said, I think you're also right to sense sort of a critique of the heavily language-based, heavily internally focused, seminar anti-racism that seems to exist. Unlike some people, I don't think these things are sort of like world historical forces threatening the basis of Western civilization. I think they're mostly just kind of cringe. But having said that, I think that it is important for people to see that the basic problem of racism isn't that there isn't enough diversity. The basic problem of racism is that there is differential treatment and differential exposure to again, dispossession and expropriation that undergirds sort of like exploitative relationships, and that the goal ought to be sort of like ending that differential treatment and also ending those exploitative relationships. Like both things have to happen in tandem for you to have like a solution to the problem of racism. So you both need to reform the criminal justice system or fundamentally change it, and you need to provide a robust economy for working people and like a robust social safety net and democratic control of workplaces through unions. Like, you need both of those things.
And I hope you didn't. I wasn't unclear that I think there is a parallel, if not very similarly situated, when Jordan Peterson does not want to talk about structural racism and he wants to talk about the individual incidents. He is, I think, more closely aligned than one would think at first blush, or at least parts of it, with the people that in some way that you're not explicitly criticizing, I think, in your piece, or the approach that you're explicitly criticizing, which is he wants to reduce it down to a sort of a dispositional perspective exclusively and individualize it. Whereas, I think some who are, the most, and I agree with you. I don't think it's I'm not too concerned about the class at Oberlin that is, or the sensitivity training at Oberlin that is, but that's reflective of also a narrow perspective, and I think one that is not as grounded. So armed with that perspective, that racism is extremely functional for the exploitive aspects of capitalism, right? I mean, it just sort of like, it's not completely discrete in terms of like, yes, wealthy people who are black can be subjected to racism, but the idea is that like you get one sort of a group of people that will, broadly be, available to be exploited without the same level of effort that would take to exploit other groups of people.
Right.
Does that necessarily follow, though, that the way that that by providing those material benefits and restructuring society, that racism is going to go away? You're still going to have, right? It seems to me, both the vestige of everything that was created dispositionally, and I think all of that, like that, almost like that culture of racism, is going to exist without the sort of material foundations for a while. I would imagine.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because for my part, I kind of go both ways on this, right? Sort of like nothing ever really goes away, right? Like I think this idea that time passes and things completely fade from view is not really the case. Things become, this is sort of the whole point of, thinking dialectically, right? Like things kind of become part of their successor. Things are transmitted through time. Even if far attenuated from their origins, you can still kind of see bits and pieces of them kind of survive through time. So I don't, in that sense, I don't think racism is sort of like going to disappear. And obviously it's sort of like personal prejudice and these sorts of things are never going to go with it. That stuff is just part of being human. But sort of this particular system of, this idea of races, this particular system of things it's a novel historical development. And I don't think if there's anything, if we ever get to a point past it, I don't think it's going to completely vanish from view. On the flip side, though, it's not for nothing, right? That whenever, like after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, during the last years of Reconstruction, there's an active effort from landed elites in the South to kind of like generate racist attitudes amongst poor white Southerners, right? Like that there is a recognition, at least from the people who have a stake in the persistence of racism, that that if you take your foot off the gas, who knows what's going to happen, and maybe things will begin to erode of their own accord, or will begin to erode as the enforcement mechanisms are no longer in place. I think about a lot, right? Is that you have this generation of Americans born in the late 60s, early 70s, who in the South especially, but around the country, attended integrated schools in large numbers for the first time and tend to have sort of much more racially liberal positions and beliefs than either their parents or in some cases their children who grew up in a bit more segregated world. You look at the integration of popular culture at the very least. You look at all these things and you can sort of see faintly that that even just from the level of like cultural production, even just on the level of kind of without any real change to sort of like the fundamental material relationships of society, you see like a weakening of racist ideas just as people kind of like come in contact with each other and understand each other as like people, and not mediated by these ideologies, which makes me think, right, that I don't know, this stuff could change much more quickly than we think.
Right.
That the rise of what we understand to be anti-Black racism in America happens relatively quickly, right? It's not a 100-year process. It's like a 50 or 60-year process, as a result of law and structure and all these things in colonial America. And so who's to say that it won't also unravel just as quickly if we do have these sort of fundamental changes in the structure of society?
Yeah, it would be interesting to find out.
Yeah. I mean, I personally don't think I'll live to see it, but who knows? Crazier things have happened.
Yeah, I think I have even less of a chance based upon my age. Really interesting stuff. And, we'll put links to those pieces, both the Madison seeing something and the guarantee of a republic, and also on what structural racism really means, as well as the Unclear and Present Danger podcast. Jamelle Bouie, really interesting stuff. I appreciate it, and hope to have you back on soon.
And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, folks, going to take, well, we're not even going to take a break, are we? Why would we? Don't have to take any break. Just blow right through this stuff. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcoming back to the program, a triumphant return. And also, I guess, for the first time, are we good with the last names here?
Yep, we are good.
Okay, well, Jamie Peck, who I think we all know her last name, and Jorge Rocha is here. Oh, there you go. There's Jamie. Dropping her first S-bomb.
Oh, God damn it. Where's it coming out of? Okay, great. Okay, great. Hi.
Hello.
Hey, guys. There you go. All right, great.
What's up?
Oh, what's up?
Oh, my God. I went to the bathroom like one last time, and I knew this was going to happen.
One time? Just one last time?
Well, I get nervous sometimes, and I have to go a lot.
I understand. And guys, welcome to the show. Obviously, Jamie, you've been here. Jorge, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Just so you know, they're pronounced Rocha.
Rocha. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Well, he wasn't even sure if he was going to use his name, and
that's why I didn't have it at first. There was a lot of I knew there's a lot of OPSEC.
Yeah, it was in the title, and then I'm like, oh no, it shouldn't be in the title, and then I put it back in the title.
Well,
so.
I was telling Jamie, the reason why I decided to come out with my name is because I'm actually currently elected as co-chair of North Brooklyn DSA, so I can't help but not be public with my name now.
Well, congratulations on the election. Jamie, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a minute, but
yeah.
I'm doing stuff. I'm still here making podcasts.
I've heard, and not only the Antifada, but now Everybody Loves Communism.
That's right. So, I guess a little bit about the show. I first started it with my friend Aaron Thorpe, who people may know from the Trillbilly Workers Party, out of really a shared desire to read and learn more leftist history, more theory, trying to learn from the past, figure out how it informs our current day praxis, and create like an accessible resource on this stuff, because I feel like a lot of people, a lot of organizers especially, have imposter syndrome because they're like, I don't know enough, and everybody feels that way. So I'm like, you know what, let's help them and ourselves, learn more in a way that's hopefully fun. Aaron had to leave to deal with some personal issues. He might be back someday, I don't know,
Hopefully.
but I rebooted it with my friend Jorge, who I know from DSA, and we've worked on some cool political education stuff together in the past. We did a Capital reading group. So despite never having done a podcast before, I knew that he was up to the task.
And is this audio only? You guys doing a video? Are you streaming? What's the deal?
So far it's only audio, but stay tuned. Maybe we'll do video and streaming soon. We'll see.
Yeah, we want to make sure we can handle what we got going on before we go adding stuff to it.
I feel like there's an upgrade in Jamie's audio quality.
Jamie's audio does seem, it seems.
Oh, yeah. Well, I did get a new mixer, so that could be it.
All right, there you go. And obviously still doing the Antifada.
I sure am. And people can still find that at patreon.com/theantifada, or, wherever you get your podcasts. We've had some cool episodes lately. What did I do last week? I did an episode with Aaron, actually, friend of the show, on the movie Born in Flames, which is a very cool feminist sci-fi political movie from 1983, about this America that exists 10 years after this war of liberation that supposedly brought about social democracy. But, oh, wait, things are still kind of bad, especially for women and especially for queer Black women. So this movie sort of follows what happens there. So I discussed that with Aaron Thorpe, and that is out now for everyone to listen to.
Excellent. All right. Well, so give us a sense of just like what in terms of the communism, the idea is just basically to help. How do you guys decide like what topics are you going to do? Is it based on our listeners sending in questions and saying, can you deal with this? Is that like the way you do it, or you just structure, like, how do you do your syllabus?
You know what? I'm going to let Jorge take this one, because I was doing it in sort of a scattershot way before he came on, and now he's got big plans for how we're going to approach it.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. No, I think that's a really good question, Sam. And really what it is, it has to do with, as the show's title says, Everybody Loves Communism. That's our political perspective, but it's important to note that we are not going to just solely kind of constrain it solely on that. We want to discuss in terms of the development of socialism, communism, anarchism, and also even social democratic ideas, because we believe it's in terms of a much larger, greater struggle. But the way we kind of want to structure it, right now we're kind of reading through Seder Revolution by Lenin. But as we were reading it, something we realized, and before it was just like a political theory podcast, but it's become this also history podcast, is that while reading it, it became apparent that while trying to read it and explain it, there was things that were talked about in terms of specific historical context that did not make sense unless you kind of understood that. So we kind of weaving in the history with the political theory. So after we're done with the State Revolution, what we're planning on doing is, take a break, but the break is to kind of take time to research, but kind of want to go in more of like a kind of a season model, which is kind of like ideas to, we're going to go back to say, a few hundred years to around, like, say, the time of the Enlightenment, and kind of talk about, these Enlightenment ideas in terms of how they exist in society. And we want to demonstrate, starting from there, is that from there, these ideas of socialism, liberation, communism, anarchism, from there, that is where, from Enlightenment about, that is where they came from. And then, so we want to talk about with some of these utopian socialists, like, say, Thomas More, or like, Charles Fourier, for instance, or even like people like Rousseau, who in many ways was like a proto of like, socialist ideas. So we want to go from that, but also concurrently talk about the histories occurring, because, something that is mentioned often is like, for instance, is like the French Revolution. We want to talk about that in our podcast, but people talk about the French Revolution, and also people talk about the Haitian Revolution. But what we want to do, for instance, is we want to talk about them as concurrent events back and forth, because they were.
Right.
So basically, it's a lot more work than I thought it was going to be at the beginning.
Well, I want to jump in there.
It's like intellectual history podcast, the intellectual history of communism on some respect.
But also of different struggles, Sam. Like, we want to talk about, how there are so an example would be we want to talk about, peasant revolts. We want to talk about the levelers. We want to talk about, the Luddites, and also, labor union, things like that.
We're doing a series on the Paris Commune right now, not to interrupt you.
No, and all of these things that, it's like, you're right. It is an intellectual history podcast, but it's also a history of, workers.
History of class struggle and the history of, trying to do the thing. See revolutions through history, and how people have approached it in the past and what we can learn from that for the future. Right.
And also we would take seriously, different reformers as well. We want to take very seriously on their own terms, people like, say, Lenin argued with people like, Edward Bernstein or like Karl Kautsky, and demean them. But what we want to do is we want to take them seriously intellectually as what they were, because unless we do that, we cannot understand what are the things that, what is it that made Lenin so mad, why people are so upset about this, but also, from there are different approaches in terms of kind of going about it. And, there are a lot of things we can learn from, not just, ourselves as, hosts, but also anyone listening.
I sympathize with how big the syllabus can kind of get out of hand, because I'm noticing you did the 3 episodes on the Communist Manifesto, which is, I think, like, good, which is like a literary hangover is my show, where we do a lot of the Leather Stocking Tales with The Last of the Mohicans, right? But you can't talk about that without talking about the French and Indian War. So you end up doubling back, and then, okay, can I talk about the French and Indian War without talking about like Queen Anne and stuff like that? And it's like, oh crap, I'm going back and back in history. So I really sympathize with that. And I'm also noticing, like, the Communist Manifesto, you did 3 episodes. I think that probably takes as much as time to listen to read. But I also think like that's important, because I'm somebody who I listen to people talk about basketball more than I watch actual basketball, and I think there's something people like about that. It's nice seeing other people take a pass at something that you want to interpret, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we are trying to figure out how to be more concise. I think if we did that many episodes per 50 pages or whatever in the future, we'd be moving pretty slow.
Well, I mean, you got time.
It's true. I mean, hopefully.
I mean, that's the beauty of podcasts, is that there's no constraint in terms of how many you can put out. Let's turn to there was a piece. I wonder if you saw this. I'm curious as to what your take is on it today. I was going to talk to Jamelle about it. We just ran out of time. Did you see this piece by Freddie DeBoer?
No, but I'm very curious.
I think I glanced at it when I saw it, but I had mixed feelings based on what I saw. But I'll be honest, I did not read the full thing.
All right.
Can you summarize it?
Well, just the title. You can summarize it. Freddie DeBoer wrote a piece in the New York Times.
Right.
I guess it was 3 days ago. Democratic socialists need to take a hard look in the mirror, arguing that there has not been enough. I guess he's arguing that that Democratic socialists don't realize that their program is not as popular as they think it is. Now, he also, he talks about, obviously, Bernie Sanders. He talks about India Walton, which I am a little bit skeptical that's what that came down, frankly. Yeah. You guys haven't read it, so it's not as relevant, but I'm a little bit skeptical, and maybe, but not so much that the about the idea of whether the American public subscribes to the ideas of democratic socialism or not, but as to whether or not that, for the vast majority of people who end up deciding elections, that they are that specific in why they vote, that it may or may not be that the American public subscribes to, democratic socialist values or programs. I tend to think that there's a lot of evidence that they do, not necessarily as labeled by that, but in terms of the programs themselves. But I'm just not convinced that people vote largely on something like that.
I think I agree with that, Sam.
Yeah, or fail to vote, as the case may be.
Yeah, I don't know that it drives people out or not. I mean, I don't, there was a lot of great things in that whatever it was, $8 trillion COVID rescue bill. But I mean, like, for instance,
Republicans also did one of those, though.
Right.
They did not nearly as much of the material benefit went to like your average person. I mean, if you look at like the one in the beginning of the PPP and the bailout, so much of that first COVID relief bill there was definitely benefits to people directly, but a huge portion of that was basically given to the Fed to back up corporate for corporate largesse.
Right.
And in terms of sheer dollars that hit people's pockets, I think there was significantly more in the one that passed, at the beginning of this year. But you look at, you look at like even the infrastructure bill, which I don't think is, terribly, I mean, it's important, but I don't know that people are going to feel it in their pockets, or at least be able to recognize that's why they're feeling it in their pockets. But Joe Biden's approval ratings dropped, or the bill itself dropped dramatically after he signed it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment on the specifics of the infrastructure bill. I'm afraid I haven't been following it that closely, but I do think that Freddie DeBoer has a point in general. I think there is a position that a lot of DSA for Bernie types especially might take, that the working class is just this sleeping giant and we just need to awaken it by having a candidate saying the right things, advocating the right programs that would be, the greatest good for all. And I think that is demonstrably not the case. We got owned and we keep getting owned, and we need to figure out how to organize in such a way that goes beyond mere persuasion and builds these kinds of lasting working class institutions that give people chances for a solidaristic experience, right? Because I think a lot of people, they saw Bernie's program and they were like, well, that all seems really great, but it's never going to happen. And I think part of that is, people are also heavily propagandized, beaten down, but like solidarity has to be experienced to be believed in many cases. So I think we really need to start from the ground up with this kind of hyper local organizing, and build a movement. I think it was a good try. The Bernie campaign, it was a Hail Mary, and it almost worked. But I think it's going to take, unfortunately, a really long time to grow the kinds of roots that we need to even think about running someone for such a high office. I also think it's a little bit revealing / concerning that a lot of the highest profile Democratic socialists have lost their races, whereas more of the low profile ones have won. I'm not sure what that says about media and spectacle, but I'm not sure if it's anything good. What do you think, Jorge?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you mentioned in the last part is particularly important. People focus a lot on with what happened with India Walton, and I agree with what you said, Sam, that it's not entirely that she identified and was a DSA candidate. There's a lot very complicated aspects in terms of why she lost in that mayoral race. But if you look at the rest of the New York State DSA races, for instance, we won pretty much all of them, and I think it's because people are resonating with a different vision of society and a different way how society should be going towards. But it's not so much kind of what you were saying before, and also what Jamie is saying about people are like, trying to examine, this person is socialist or this or that. It has more to do with like, well, what are things that are going to benefit me in a very real sense now? This reminds me of, like, it's kind of what you said about, because like the infrastructure bill, I agree that, I of course have my criticisms of Biden and the Democrats, but there are some very real things that are good in terms of the infrastructure bill and also the COVID relief. I think the family tax credit and like the permanent increase in food stamps is such a wonderful thing in my opinion, because at the end of the day, I care about the real things that are improving people's lives. But a lot of that just seems very obtuse and very abstract, and it doesn't seem like an immediate impact. It just reminds me, and for us as organizers, something that's important to remember is like, what are things that are helping people who are workers now? It reminds me of like, the Black Panther Party, where, there's, I don't remember the woman's name. It was a woman that was living in Oakland, and, they were like asking like, why are you sending your children to this, the food program, the breakfast food program to the Black Panthers had. And she said something along the lines of, well, I don't know what communism is, but it's feeding my children.
Right.
And like at the end of the day, people don't really care. The vast majority of people, like, us three, all everyone here, Majority Report, or people listening in a home, most of us we're the weird ones that have like these really structured, logical kind of formulations of like the way our world views and what have you. But most people are just trying to get by, and that's what they respond to. So that is our task, to try to reach them in that sense.
What is going on? I mean, obviously, you guys can't speak for the entire organization, but from your perspectives, like what is the DSA prioritizing now, and has that in this period of sort of, I guess, post Bernie, which has now been almost a year and a half plus, I guess. But has the DSA changed its priorities in either way? What are they, and is there a timeline? Like, I mean, is there some notion of like, we're going to, for the next couple of years, we're doing this, and with the hopes of achieving that, and like, what's the plan?
Yeah, so great you asked that, Sam, because this year at the National Convention, we passed a national platform for DSA in terms of, there's a long list of, you can think of many issues in terms of whether it be race, whether it be labor organizing, whether it be elections, and there's a bunch of kind of a wish list of sorts of what we're trying to achieve here. Now, in terms of post Bernie, I mean, I think part of it also DSA is trying to reinvent itself after Bernie, and there's a lot of different groups internally in terms of trying to have their own vision. Some people are much more prioritizing electoral campaigns, which to be fair is the most successful program that DSA has in terms of people knowing DSA. And so people are focusing on trying to, we should be going all in on this. There are those who are trying to focus more on, say, abolitionist organizing, given what happened last year. And then there are those who are focusing, maybe we should be doing more tenant organizing. There's been some very successful tenant organizing in the Bay Area, for instance. With some people who are focusing on, say, mutual aid, which are, we need to be focusing on making sure our fellow workers are surviving and going on forward, first of all. So there is a multitude of different perspectives occurring right now in the DSA. And at this time, really what it is trying to identify what is our identity post-Bernie. But I will emphasize that I would point you to that national platform that DSA passed. It's on the website. It's like, if you go to dsausa.org, there should be a link to the national platform, and it has like a long list of all the things, and it's in beautiful this web design.
No, well, I think it's also, it seems to me it's hard to sort of disaggregate post Bernie from COVID, at least in terms
100%.
of like, it's a really, just in the context of doing this show, I'm like, those things happened almost the same day.
And also George Floyd uprising, all of that's together.
Yes. But I wonder if like there were opportunities or if COVID provided opportunities, or I should say the pandemic, obviously not COVID. If the pandemic and our responses to it provided opportunities or exposed to certain, aspects of that were not being met by the DSA. I mean, I feel like a lot of the labor, actions that we've seen over the past, I don't know, 6 months, more, 7, this year, basically 10 months, have been a function of COVID, that people are realizing like, this job sucks, or my boss sucks, or there's, we're consistently understaffed, or whatever it is.
The great resigning, people calling it too, with like white collar jobs. Yeah.
And I think a lot of that happened where it was just, people basically 55 and older. I think most of the statistics show that it was like in that age where people are just like, I don't want to work anymore because this sucks. And I'll try and, if I can make it to retirement, retirement, or partial retirement, I'll do that. Was there stuff like from the perspective of the DSA that was capitalized on in this regard?
Yeah, it's complicated because, despite DSA being the largest socialist organization in America, about 100,000 people, it still is limited in terms of how much we can do. America's gigantic. But, there was a lot of, when the pandemic originally hit, I know, for example, in New York City and also a lot of different places, there was mutual aid and also people trying to help in terms of giving food for especially the elderly, to try to delivering groceries and things like that. But in terms of labor organizing or things with COVID, I think, in general, we could have done more. I'll be honest with you. That's how I feel. And here I am only speaking as myself, not as a representative of DSA. And to be honest, I think there's a lot we could be doing more. But I think this is just also part of what, kind of like what you were saying before, in terms of what we need to do in terms of moving forward after Bernie, what our identity should look like. Because, clearly, at least from my point of view, we should not just be solely focused on elections. We should be focusing in terms of what our with like you're pointing to, like, all the strikes, the Kellogg strike, or like the Nabisco, and then what happened today with the John Deere kind of finalizing, and also all these different strikes that are happening. There's like the UPS strike that's on the horizon, like it's going to happen. That people, like the leadership is saying that in 2023, they're hoping to be very trying to really face for a fight when their contract is up. Like people are starting, labor militancy is rising in this country. And, DSA has played a part of it, but it's not played, a central part of it. I think it has to do with what you're saying. This is kind of what we argue about, myself and Jamie, in terms of like, a lot of it has to do with like, it is overdetermined in the sense of there are larger societal material forces at play than, say, individual people can really have a, history is moving along. People, when, COVID happened, and then the pandemic, and then, and also with like the massive collapse of the economy, like, very quickly when quarantine happened, and then also looming crisis that's kind of hanging over people's heads while wealth inequality is shooting up. You don't have to be approached by a socialist necessarily to be thinking, well, this is not right.
Yeah, right.
Like, we had a major uprising last year, and maybe the politics weren't as fully formed as some people might have liked them to be, but we had a mass of people, proletarians, multiracial proletarians, but led by Black and brown youth, saying, this is fucked. It's bad. We're tired of watching people get killed. We're tired of going hungry. We're tired of seeing our relatives die of COVID, all of the things in one. And something I've really been thinking through is why the two great surges, the two great populist uprisings of the past 2 years came out in two different parts, by which I mean the Bernie campaign and the George Floyd uprising. And there were certainly some places where they overlapped, but I think perhaps the challenge for any socialist organization going forward is going to be to try to synthesize these things and grow together groups that are led by different fractions of the class. Because, as you know, the typical DSA person is sort of a downwardly mobile white millennial, maybe white collar worker who went to college. Not all of them, obviously, but that is disproportionately true. whereas the people who participated in the direct actions and the militant portions of the George Floyd uprising were largely more Black and brown proletarian youth. So I really think it is an essential task of any socialist or communist organization to figure out how to grow those things together.
Yeah, and I think another thing, just real quick, Sam, it's just like, it's on this last note, it's just, I think an important thing too that we should be mindful of, and I have this in the front of my mind, as someone who's Latino, it's like, I was talking to Jamie about this last night. A big factor is like, people like, and I mean this literally, I do not mean this metaphorically. There are many people who they're ready or already on board with like a lot of what the left wants, even the most radical demands, but many organizers just literally do not speak the same language, as in like they do not speak, many people out there do not speak English or do not speak English well. And like, a good example in terms of the evidence, look at like the massive amount of support by Latinos for Bernie in the primary. And, a lot of that has to do with like, if you're trying to reach them to do other things, how are they good? I know for myself, it's something like a criticism I have about DSA. And again, this has more to do with the demographics than it is about structurally. It's about, my parents voted for Bernie in 2020. They're really on board with like a lot of the stuff I talk about, or Jamie argues, or DSA argues, but I can't bring them to a meeting because, they feel out of place because they mostly speak Spanish.
Right.
Well, to that end, we have an ambitious long-term project to make our podcast available in Espanol. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm saying it now, so I guess we have to do it.
Yeah, well, if everyone who is listening and is interested in making sure that happens long-term, be sure to subscribe to our Patreon on patreon.com/everybodylovescommunism.
Good job, Jorge.
Well done. All right. Well, before we go, Jamie, do you want to talk about? You want to plug your other life?
Oh yeah. So people may or may not know this about me, but I used to DJ and book a lot of shows and music and parties, and I've recently gotten back into it through my new boyfriend who runs a record label. And at first I was like, oh yeah, let me just DJ this. He asked me to DJ and I was like, all right, fine. I'm not like a real DJ. I don't jockey any discs. I don't like match beats, but I do have good dark wave playlists and I know how to use the CDJs now. And so I was like, yeah, okay, I'll DJ your party. Yeah, okay, I'll book a headliner. Yeah, also your t-shirts could use a little work. So I guess I'm a part of this record label now. It's called House of Feelings. And we have events like, we've been doing them like every month. It's crazy. We just had a crazy one at Elsewhere in Brooklyn, if you heard of that.
The musicians are fantastic. They're so talented. And I mean, seriously, you're one of the singers, I think Andrew, he's such an incredible singer.
Thanks, man. I agree. He's a disco god. But our next event is actually tonight. Oh my God, it's tonight. I got to finish making my playlist at Wonderville right here in Bushwick, Brooklyn. So if anyone wants to come hang out with me after my set, I'm going really early. I think I'm DJing at like 8:45, but yeah, I'll be free to hang out after that. So come on down or follow House of Feelings on the internet, on the social media to stay updated on what we are doing.
We will put links, obviously, to Everybody Loves Communism and to your party tonight in the YouTube description and the podcast description.
Hell yeah.
Do you mind if I plug something else, Sam?
No, not of course.
Okay. So I feel like I would be remiss as responsibility, as elected leadership in DSA to say that, this coming Monday, if you're in North Brooklyn, being like Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, and you want to go to a DSA event, well, there's great luck for you because this Monday at 7 p.m. at the Mayday space, there's going to be a general meeting of North Brooklyn DSA. So be sure to come out. And if you want to know political education, and North Brooklyn DSA does have political education, there will be a session on race and class led by, the speaker will be Cheryl Rivera, who's like one of the founding editors of the magazine Lux, and was also an incredible organizer. I have much respect for her. This will be on a Tuesday as well at the Mayday space.
Great. All right, guys. Go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, I feel like I should mention one more time. We're on fans.fm/everybody loves communism in addition to Patreon. And we just made a Patreon as well, but we love Fans FM. Kyle built this amazing platform for the Majority Report and for other leftist podcasts to use and spread the word. And he's so cool. He's doing it for all the right reasons. And they take way less of our money than Patreon does. And for that reason, we're charging people a little bit more on the Patreon than on the fans. But, you can pick the platform that you're most comfortable with.
You mean you're charging people less on the fans?
Yeah. Is that what did I say?
Well,
You're charging people more on Patreon.
Oh, right. That's not what I said. Oh my God.
It's the same thing, but I'm just
It's the framing of
marketing.
it.
But the other thing is too, get a URL that directs to that. That's my thing.
Sam is like a Bitcoin guy, but about URL.
That's right. That's basically it. Can't believe, Jamie, you didn't pick that up from me. That's really hurts. Get the URL and forward it. It's $11.
All right. I'm writing it down. I'm writing it down right now.
All right. We'll put all the links in the podcast. Jamie, it was great to see you again. Jorge, great to meet you. And good luck with the show. Everybody Loves Communism. Is that like a play on like Everybody Loves Raymond?
It's exactly what it is. In fact, the logo is also a play on it too.
I figure like Everybody Loves Raymond, right? That really funny show with Ray Romano. So, huh?
Did you ever watch that show?
No, I'm joking. I don't like it very much at all, but
I've never seen it.
I figure if we just swap out Raymond for communism, maybe people will be like, oh, I like that too.
It might work. We will see. All right, guys, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, going to head into the fun half of the program. Remember, MajorityLive.com. Just got to say that just because I was talking about the URL. Oh, well, you mean you don't have to go to the Wilbur.com/majority-report-live show? That's correct. You just go to MajorityLive.com. But what are you going to do when you do like a New York show or a Tahiti show or whatever? Well, just re-forward MajorityLive.com. That's what I will do. Look at this. Can't believe. I feel like all my work about forwarding URLs.
Yeah. just hard to get enthusiastic about it, I guess.
Well, I don't know. I guess it just means.
I mean, I remember Bitly back when Twitter was only 140 characters, and that was a necessity. But we don't even have a website for Left Reckoning or Literary Hangover. So,
all right. Well, fair enough. You could still set up a URL and have it just go right to where you sign up on iTunes.
So if Sam is
Am I starting to fade?
Starting to shudder a little bit on the screen, so we might have to reconnect you in the break here.
Okay. We're going to take a break, folks. And breaking news, Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty on all counts. All counts. All right. We're going to take a break. Don't forget, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Lekian Media Universe?
Yeah, we had a full show on Wednesday. Go watch that. William Shockey of Africa is a Country, talking about the death of William de Klerk and Frederick William de Klerk, and who should be credited for ending apartheid. And also Jacob of the Valley Labor Report, talking about the Warrior Met coal strike and that stuff. So and also David Griscom and I are going to be going over, I think, a appearance of Whoopi Goldberg and Christopher Hitchens on Real Time with Bill Maher, or maybe it was Politically Incorrect, where Whoopi defends communism for patrons. Patreon.com/leftreckoning.
All right, folks. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You nervous? You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude,
Dude.
you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance. Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
that's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. We are back. We'll look into the Rittenhouse thing. To be honest with you, I don't even know what the charges were. I mean, I imagine not guilty on the charges of murder. I thought there were some, and I guess they threw out the charge about his crossing state lines with the firearm. I mean, broadly speaking, it's pretty amazing to me. And again, I want to make this absolutely clear. I didn't follow the trial in general, I don't, not just as a function of this show. This was a policy that I had dating back to pre-O.J. Simpson. I don't follow trials like criminal trials.
What prompted it? Because I feel like the Simpson thing would have been. I could see like, okay, I've had my fill of like covering these things.
Oh, I didn't watch any of it.
Right, but
I didn't watch a single moment of that trial.
But you were already over it, is what I'm saying.
I just like my sense is that it. You know, I am not in a position to assess, and it's more like a soap opera-y on some level, frankly. And, you know, there are structural reasons why I imagine a guy like OJ gets off money, and structural reasons why a guy like Kyle Rittenhouse get off not money. And so, you know, those things are more relevant to me. So he faced 5 felony charges at the trial. single count each of first-degree reckless homicide, first-degree intentional homicide, 2 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety, and a single count of first-degree intentional homicide. Those are all pretty high bars. I wonder, had there been a manslaughter thing, like, hey, you put yourself in a situation where you are untrained to deal with crowd control, and you walk into that situation with a gun ostensibly to crowd control, there is a somewhat of a likelihood that someone's going to end up dead or injured. That, to me, I'm surprised that there wouldn't have had some form of charge that would have been, a subsidiary charge. I just don't know. I just don't know criminal law at all. I don't spend any time thinking, but as a broader policy matter, this is not a great precedent. The idea that anybody has a license to pick up a gun and go decide, I'm in charge of policing a protest now. Why are you in charge of the policing the protest? 'Cause, man, look at my gear. Look at my vest I bought at Orvis, or look at, what's that, the big one? No, that's not the hunting one out in the Midwest. Cabela's. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Look at the vest I got at Cabela's. Of course I'm going out to police the protest.
I'm also a medic now, sort of.
Yeah. No, I haven't been trained yet as an EMT, but I might in the future. And everybody knows medics always travel with their weapons. You didn't learn that at protest medic school? Where's your medic badge? Where's the cross that you put on the back of your Cabela's vest? I mean, this is what I think is problematic here, and maybe a failure of the prosecution to sort of perceive this is, the implications of this are much bigger than just this one case. Also seems to me to be, for people who are worried about, free speech, I don't know, I would feel my speech inhibited more by guys who show up with guns than people who start call me names that I don't agree with. My free speech is not inhibited by you saying that I'm bigoted or a racist or a whatever it is that you're complaining about. My speech is sort of materially inhibited when you show up with a gun and express dissatisfaction with what I'm doing. I don't know. That's my perspective on that. But those seem like, I am surprised by the high bar on all of those charges. I would have thought there would have been either subsidiary charges, or you would have gone with a manslaughter. Seems to me like a reasonable person could have known, if they show up at a protest with a semi-automatic weapon and start patrolling around there without the training, without the authority, something bad could happen. That seems to me to be, I don't know, fairly straightforward. But like I say, here is, should we play any of this like Kevin McCarthy last night?
I completely missed all this Kevin McCarthy stuff, to be honest, last night.
Yeah, all right, let's do it. There's let's play all three. Kevin McCarthy last night gets up there and he's on a tour to make sure that this is basically the beginning of Kevin McCarthy's campaign to be House Majority Leader if the Republicans take control of the House. If they don't take control of the House, I also think that it's part of his campaign to try and remain the House Minority Leader. Because they've already gerrymandered away the lead that Democrats have in the House. It's already gone. And this is based upon 2020 numbers, which was, you should know, the Democrats won. Like, in other words, they had a lot of people come out to vote for them. They're going to need more than 2020 in terms of a differential with the Republicans to overcome, to even get back to parity. Here is Kevin McCarthy on the mic last night. We was talking for like 6-8 hours. Was that what it was? Here it is. Yeah, start with whatever order you think is best.
You're celebrating it when inflation is at a 31% height. Gas prices, Thanksgiving, a border that in a few months breaks every record of the last 3 years combined.
It's a little bit excited. What does that mean? The border breaks every record. There's a lot of people.
Records all over the place.
That means that we apprehended more people at the border?
Yeah, I think so.
And Joe Biden did Thanksgiving this year, which is a huge, why?
Like, also, like, we should just say the reason so many people are coming at this point is in part because of Trump's not in office anymore, and they think they might have a better chance.
Oh, absolutely. Of course.
And so I don't know, like, what that record signifies. Like, Biden should just be processing his people and letting them through, I think.
There's also, there was this thing over the past couple of years, this deadly pandemic, which probably usurped a bunch of things. Meanwhile, McCarthy's up there. They revised upwards by 650,000 people picked up jobs over the course of the summer. That's a big revision. But then again, this is not for the American public. This is for the right-wing base. Continue.
I have a friend who serves in the Senate. Right before COVID, he was on a Codell with other senators. And he was sitting and having a communication, maybe you've experienced this as well, with a military general in the Chinese Communist Army.
Talking about his experiences.
You know what that general said to him? America, you're weak. You're weak, America. You're weak because you believe in God and you take fentanyl.
Well, let's just imagine, like, the senator that this Chinese general is. Senator might say, like, my name's Kevin or Bill or Mary, not America. You believe in God and you take fentanyl. Now, what is Kevin McCarthy trying to say here? Because presumably, Kevin McCarthy thinks Americans should not take fentanyl, and that's a problem because Joe Biden has encouraged all the fentanyl use.
Said fentanyl is the, I don't know.
But wouldn't Kevin McCarthy also say, like, but you should be religious? So what is he saying, that we shouldn't be doing any calls with Chinese generals? Like, what? I don't understand. Like, why is he saying this?
Yeah, to stick to those generals, shouldn't I take fentanyl and go to mass?
Right. I don't understand. Like, what is it that we're supposed to glean from this? That the problem is that Chinese generals think that we're weak for both a right reason and a wrong reason. Like, I think, frankly, maybe what McCarthy is saying, that we should not be so religious and we should not take so much fentanyl. Or just as his argument that this Chinese general, or even all Chinese generals, have a very weird assessment of America. Like, I don't understand. Like, what is he trying to communicate here? Why was this story so important? They're laughing at us because we take fentanyl and because we go to church. Yeah, I was Maoist Sam Seder. Fentanyl is the opiate of the masses. There you go. All right, final Kevin McCarthy. Now, you can go back and watch the entire 8 hours if you want.
I don't know why Republicans want a California Republican to be the leader anyway, but
Reagan, back in the day. McCarthy was a surprise pick because everybody was saying he's an idiot.
Yeah, he's so bad at this.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, at night, I look at these two paintings, and I wonder in moments in time, what if Abraham Lincoln was not assassinated? Malice towards none. There would be no Jim Crow laws. Mr. Speaker, I'd love to debate Jim Crow one day, because another portrait just hanging down from Lincoln is Joseph Rainey, the first black American to get elected to Congress. He was a Republican. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, 60 years later, the first black Democrat was elected to Congress. You see, Joseph Rainey was a slave and broke free and came back after the Civil War and got elected in Charleston, South Carolina. We defeated that original sin. But Joseph Rainey wasn't the only black Republican elected. More started getting elected. And in the South, we had a competitive presidential election. The Democrats said they would recognize the Republican if they moved the federal troops out of the South. And when they did, Democrat won the states. And they enacted Jim Crow laws. One of the darkest moments in our history. Had Abraham Lincoln...
Amazing. First off, he wants to debate Jim Crow laws.
So he's saying about, like, okay, so the first black American was a Republican. How many black Republicans are in the House right now?
Well, I mean,
two.
On some level, I think that this is the thing I appreciate about this from McCarthy is that it gives us another opportunity to tell Americans a little bit of their history that they have completely unaware of. Abraham Lincoln was, in fact, a Republican. That is true. In fact, the radical Republicans, as they were called in the course of following the Civil War, instituted things like public school and were attempting to bring about a whole host of equal protection. I mean, of course, they had passed the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, but they would have been far more aggressive were it not for Johnson, who was a Democrat. And when black politicians, many of whom were Republicans, some of whom were progressives of the Progressive Party, took power in places like South Carolina, North Carolina, many states across the country. It was wealthy, maybe sometimes Democrats, probably landowners and former slave owners who orchestrated, like, essentially coups to throw people out. And Democrats throughout this time, they were known as Dixiecrats because they were mostly in the South, were incredibly racist, and they developed these Jim Crow laws, and the Supreme Court supported them, and restrictions on voting, to the point where you get into like the teens and 20s, and the number of KKK people in this country, like card carrying, it's only around 6-7% of the American population. Not even adult, I'm talking total population. Democrats remained this way until like the mid-60s, when the Democratic Party was big enough that they said, we can afford to lose a chunk of these Southern Dixiecrats. And they passed the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, Medicare, Medicaid, and then they all became Republicans. And all those Republicans, over that time, there was a big sort of switch.
There was also the Kennedy-Nixon thing with MLK being in prison, and the Kennedys made the call and Nixon didn't.
Yep.
And it's also interesting, like there's one thing that Lincoln did and those Republicans is they used state power to attack structural racism in the form of slavery. Yeah, I think if Lincoln would have survived, we would have done more in that fight. I don't think we would have completely finished it, but yeah, the killing of Lincoln and the restoration of racialized forms of labor coercion, I agree with Kevin McCarthy. It's a shame.
It's sort of like, just imagine this. Let's just say that someone said, let's say the Colts won the Super Bowl. And somebody said, they used to be the Baltimore Colts, so Baltimore won. Wait a second. What about the Ravens? No.
Or like if the Buccaneers win a championship now, it's like the Patriots still win it because it's Tom Brady still.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's amazing. It's so cynical and just plays off like this
first grade level understanding of
first
history.
grade level understanding of like, I like the name Republicans. It really is supposed to be about what the party supports and the policies. But
yeah, in a way, John Wilkes Booth, as somebody in the comments says, was the first Rittenhouse.
Yeah. I imagine he was just the most famous at that time. There may have been some other ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of Rittenhouses. But
yeah. In fact, he's, I mean, the idea of like, you've got people trying to garner rights for black people in this country, and the idea of an armed vigilante coming out and shooting at these people and whatever it is.
Apple pie.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Jesse James. A lot of people don't know, but the outlaw was basically this Confederate flunky who went around particularly targeting banks owned, especially if they were interracial bank owners or stuff like that. Like they were a white supremacist gang.
I had no idea about that about Jesse James.
There's a book. Maybe we'll get an author on that because it's very.
Oh, that's fascinating. I had no idea about that. No idea. That's why Billy the Kid much better.
I'm less familiar with Billy the Kid.
I think Billy the Kid was a little bit like, I don't know, maybe I'm just imposing that from my knowledge of the Peck and Paw movie. But Pat Garrett, Billy the Kid, very much about, arguably anti-capitalist.
Little Robin Hood of the West sort of thing.
There's a little bit of that, yeah. A little bit of that.
Well, it's funny because people like to imagine Jesse James as that, but actually he was white
I bet you there's some
terrorist.
conflation between Billy the Kid. That's my guess. Here is we talked about Jordan Peterson. Let's play this. Here's Jordan Peterson. And understand what he's trying to argue here. It is it's very illustrative. If you are one of the people who think that, who are, somewhat repelled, and I think in certain instances, I don't think it's as big of a deal, like Jamelle Bouie had said to us, get a little bit repelled by the idea of like racism as aesthetics and, what you call sort of like, people malign wokeism as being like, too about like, I don't know, just
victims and stuff like that.
Victims, but also like the proper thing to say and this and that. Understand, Jordan Peterson's saying basically the same thing. He is talking that there is no phenomena of racism. There are just people who are mean based upon race. And here he is explaining this concept. And, people who actually know what they're talking about with this stuff are just sort of aghast.
Well, that's a fair point. I'll come to John.
I think the same point I made earlier applies, is that...
Oh, pause it for 1 second. They're responding. Apparently, there was a British cricketer. Is it British? A guy named Azim Rafiq. And apparently he experienced racism from his teammates. And...
Who better ask than Jordan Peterson about that?
Right, exactly. BBC panel.
Well, that's a fair point. I'll come to John.
I think the same point I made earlier applies, is that things need to be particularized. rather than generalized, as a general rule, let's say. And so this cricket player was facing racism by his own account.
Now pause it. Now pause it for 1 second. Okay, like understand what he's saying here. Things need to be particularized as opposed to generalized. In other words, I am going to start with the premise that there are no societal phenomenons, that there is no structure to society whatsoever. And you will see if I start with that assumption, that basic premise, that there are no structures, that there are no broad trends within society, that there is nothing undergirding our existence in society, that moment to moment are completely distinct, that individual to individual are completely distinct. There is no shared experience. There are no shared institutions. If I start with that premise, which is what he says, then guess what? I'm going to find no structural racism. You start with that premise, guess what? You're going to find no structural anything. But that is understand. And it is not a coincidence that this guy is a psychologist as opposed to a sociologist or an anthropologist or anybody else who comes from the perspective of like, we actually are social beings. We create structures and institutions. There is such a thing as society, and that one society is not the same as another society. And the things that differentiate them is not the individual attributes of each individual in there, but rather the way they are structured.
Yeah, this is why he fetishizes the individual.
All right, play from the beginning, Bradley.
Well, that's a fair point. I'll come to John.
I think the same point I made earlier applies, is that things need to be particularized rather than generalized, as a general rule, let's say. And so this cricket player was facing racism by his own account. The question is, who, when, what, exactly? Because otherwise it degenerates into something like a discussion of structural racism. And when it becomes abstracted up to that level, first of all, that pits group against group, which I think is entirely counterproductive. And it actually doesn't address the issue. You know, racism is a global and vague term.
Sorry, but why would you possibly do that? What did that mean?
Because I said it was a global and vague term.
The inverted commas as if it's not a real thing.
No, that isn't what it meant.
Well, what did it mean then? Explain.
It meant that it's indicative of low resolution thinking. And what I mean by that is we use all these terms frequently in discussions like this that are
He was
containers
of
undifferentiated content.
He was repeatedly called abusive terms directly linked to his ethnicity.
By who?
By not just one, but repeated members of the Yorkshire Cricket Club. He's had people contacted him. If it walks like a duck, Jordan, talks like a duck, it's a duck. It's racism.
I'm not denying his experience.
Right.
What I asked was exactly who and when, and you just answered that question. So I would say those specific people should be held specifically to account for their actions before any movement up the abstraction hierarchy to a discussion of something like structural racism, which I don't think is helpful.
Well, he has talked about institutional racism in cricket. He says that's what he's experienced as a term, institutional racism.
Right, I know. And like I said, I believe that abstracting up the problem to that level of analysis does no good because it pits groups against groups. I think it exacerbates the problem. The concept of structural racism. It's too imprecise. It doesn't address the issue. Now, that doesn't mean, that does not
Pause it for 1 second. I got to jump in here. Understand what he's saying here is that in his calculus, it is a total coincidence that these different individuals attacked this one guy for his ethnicity or his race. It's a total coincidence that they all happen to, because has nothing to do with that one group of people who, that there's probably, according to Jordan Peterson, there could be nothing similar amongst the people who are attacking this one guy. It's just a coincidence that they did it. That's why you need to look at each specific incident as if it is particular, and there is nothing that is consistent there. And And the reason why he does it is because he simply wants to deny structural racism. All the gobbledygook he lays in there is just, it's stunning to watch.
Yeah, when he says, I'm not denying his individual experience, he's actually telling the truth there. What he's denying is structural racism entirely. And he's
just saying it's a coincidence.
Yeah, and this is entirely in line with basically with this entire CRT freakout. I'm just going to read this from North Dakota's new ban of critical race theory. It says, for the purposes of this section, critical race theory means a theory that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but that racism is systematically embedded in American society and American legal system to facilitate racial inequality. This is the entire game.
And to think, like, do you think that Jordan Peterson doesn't refer to things like crime? Like, according to Jordan Peterson's theory here, there's no increase in crime. There are just individuals who commit crimes, and it's a coincidence that there may be more crime.
And here's another one. There's no increase in feminists going crazy. There's just individual feminists that you might be able to particularize.
Exactly. I mean, this is low resolution thinking. It is fascinating, the language this guy uses for basically, I am going to deny that structural racism, that anything structural can exist, and therefore there is no structural racism. It really is just, I mean, embarrassing that this guy is actually sitting on a panel of people who are taking anything seriously. Continue with this, if there's anything left.
I believe that abstracting up the problem to that level of analysis does no good because it pits groups against groups. I think it exacerbates the problem.
Racism is not a function of groups.
It's too imprecise. It doesn't address the issue. Now, that does not mean racism does not exist. That is not what I'm saying in the least.
Maybe let's do less of the hand movements and let's look at the evidence.
So, yeah.
I did it once, but the racism doesn't exist on his, like, but actually that is what he's saying.
Yeah.
Because it's either individuals who don't like a guy and it's because they don't like his race. But how could two people not like his race in the same way if there is no racism? And then suddenly it's an abstraction. Suddenly it's something that exists and that people tap into, as opposed to be just sort of like generating organically within a person. I mean, according to Jordan Peterson, racists are born. They are not created.
Well, it's like we have terms. It's called bigotry is what he's describing.
Bigotry, and there's no, what is the specific bigotry? Maybe he doesn't like him because he doesn't like the way that he, hits the wicket or whatever it is.
Or the facial hair or something.
Yes.
Like
I mean, what a clown show this guy is. It really is amazing. You can't come up with a better way of arguing against structural racism, except for the idea of, like, we shouldn't even talk about the concept of structures within society, about anything.
Who do you think Peterson's worried about pissing off if he, I think him and when Dave Rubin says, like, they're going to go woke to the C-suite, I think these guys are used to talking to, like, powerful, rich dudes who like that's who they're speaking for in this sort of stuff. So it's like, the Sun's owner has this racism stuff going on right now. And it's like, that's who Peterson is serving when he says, let's not escalate this up the hierarchy.
Right.
Let's try to keep this as a low level, a problem for, like, HR to deal with.
Right, exactly. This is an individual problem. There is no societal response to this because the problem's not societal. I would be curious to see if he says that about other things. Like, I mean, how does he even talk about the abstraction of masculinity being under attack? How can masculinity exist?
Yeah, he's generalizing too much about the attack on.
It's completely low resolution thinking. You can't see each individual penis because of the low resolution.
I mean, I like low resolution thinking as, like, the sort of people who were freaking out that Muslims were going to take over Europe 20 years ago.
20 years ago? What was it? Like, they were talking about no-go neighborhoods like 6-7 years ago? What happened to that phenomena?
Turned out that was low resolution thinking.
Oh my God. is it even worth like talking about Alex Berenson going on saying there's no evidence that vaccines halt infection or transmission? Put this guy on. How many times did Alex Berenson, like, you could know nothing about this dude. The one thing that you, like, anybody who knows Alex Berenson has ever been sort of subjected to anything he says. Israel studies. There's no difference. Now, Israel just mandated or just did boosters for everybody in the country. Probably, I to be honest with you, I don't even know if they're servicing, they're providing vaccinations for Palestinians. My guess is probably not. This is not the point for me bringing up Israel. The point is, to the extent that they want to protect people, they're triple vaccinating them because there is data, reams of data that show you are not only far, far less likely to get seriously ill from COVID, you are also less likely to catch and transmit. But notice the change in the adjectives I used, or the adverbs. Far, 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 far less likely to get sick, seriously ill, I should say, from COVID if you're vaccinated. Less likely to get infected and communicate it. I mean,
just like that's an important step because like you need to be infected first before you can start communicating it. And a lot of these people that say like, oh, infected people transmit just as much as or vaccinated people transmit just like unvaccinated people. Well, they had a lot less chance to be infected in the first place.
Yeah, it's not. It's exactly. If you have COVID and you're vaccinated, yes, the chances of you passing that COVID on are the same as if you're unvaccinated. But the chances of you getting it in the first place if you're vaccinated are less. Not 100%, maybe not even like 70% less, but maybe closer to like 50 or 60% less. All right, let's play this Tucker's vaccine denial.
So there is no medical justification for this. I would say you summed up the rules or the science quite nicely. I'd go even further than that. There's now some evidence that 6, 7, 8 months after you get your second dose that you might actually be at higher risk of infection if you're vaccinated. There's a good Swedish study that has some evidence of that. By the way, in Germany...
It is so stupid, that comment. We know, that's why they're issuing boosters, that your protection wanes after 6 or 7 months. Now, he's admitting right there, right? Like, he's admitting it right there by saying that it's 6 or 7 months out as opposed to like 2 weeks after you get vaccinated. But think about what is possible if you are vaccinated. Like, the way you're behaving, it's very possible the way you're behaving is far less protective of yourself than you were before you were vaccinated. So to the extent that there are any studies that show that, there's no way to disaggregate that behavior change. There's no way to sort of not include, but continue.
After you get your second dose that you might actually be at higher risk of infection if you're vaccinated. There's a good Swedish study that has some evidence of that. And by the way, in Germany and Austria and all over Central Europe right now, those are very highly vaccinated countries. They're seeing unprecedented numbers of infections, so much so that they're going back into lockdown. So there's just no evidence that the vaccines halt infection or transmission in any way. And there is some evidence, as you said, that they may help you avoid a severe case or death. I would say the evidence for that over time has been weakening. But even if that's true, as you say, that's your own personal choice then. It's like getting a colonoscopy. It's like riding a motorcycle. It's your choice to protect yourself in that way. So I think you're right about all of it. As for the politics, I don't really understand why the Biden administration is doing this.
All right.
Just
First
how
off,
nefarious they are.
This is Berenson doing the same lies that Jimmy Dore did about the Singapore study. You're comparing pre and post lockdown infection rates. And we know the efficacy of vaccines. So you're comparing pre and post lockdown infection rates. And we know the efficacy of vaccines. So you're comparing pre and post lockdown infection rates. And we know the efficacy of vaccines. So you're comparing pre and post lockdown infection rates. And we know the efficacy of vaccines. So you're comparing pre and post lockdown infection rates. So you're comparing And we don't have the ability. The ability that we have is that, like, look around this country. Look around this country. Unvaccinated people, more spread, more illness. Now, in the Northeast and whatnot, we're going inside more. There's going to be an increase in infections, despite the fact that everybody's vaccinated, or whatever the vaccination rate. There's going to be an increase in relative to where we were last year, where everybody was not engaging with other people. Austria just imposed a vaccine mandate because all these other countries, they don't know what they're doing either. They're all, and even Cuba, which is pushing vaccines on it, like, regardless of the political or economic system, for whatever reason, they're all functioning in the same way. It's so bizarre. They're all in the pocket of Bill Gates.
Yeah, and you know what the top, like, 7-day average for death rate in Israel has been in this recent spike is about 25 or so, like that. Florida has about 2 times the population of Israel, actually a little bit more than that, but the highest spike they got was about 430. So maybe there might be some difference on, like, you still do a spike, and, like, that's how these people point to, like, look at a spike still happens.
Unbelievable.
The spike would have been way worse, you idiots.
What would you say the chances of Tucker Carlson not having a booster shot are?
I think he's got it.
I will, if Tucker Carlson agrees to reveal whether he has a booster shot or not, I will reveal, what is it he asked? What's your favorite position of sex? I will also reveal that to him. Yep. I will reveal that to him. Matthew from Philadelphia. If each member of your audience was going to make one call to a legislature in November at your direction, what is the gist of what they should call about and say? I would say at this point, pass voter protection. Like, you pass the election reform bill. That's what I would say. Cattletown Napper, marrying my best friend this weekend after a decade together. Can we get a shofar? Yes, congratulations. Beckon our reckoning. Sam, you grotesquely uncharismatic pile of dog shit. Oh, I missed you. I feel like we haven't had one of these in a while. You look like somebody carved a blobfish face into Yoda's nutsack. Your very essence just screams poor man's Chris Kattan. Never has so much arrogance been so undeserved. I'm not a geneticist, but looking at you, I can't help but think this is what happens when the guy from Blue's Clues gets hate fucked by a Teletubby. Anyway, I love the show, and I just wanted to ask, what's the difference between the theory of general relativity and the theory of special of relativity? I feel like maybe that's like, I wonder if that's like David Feldman. Like, it just occurs to me that maybe that's David Feldman. I don't know.
Poor man's Chris Kattan is tough.
Yeah, that is tough. Well, because, like, who remembers Chris Kattan? That's only a deep cut. That's
only people who really like to rent Night at the Roxbury at sleepovers like I did.
Oh, well, there you go. That's terrifying. The general theory of relativity is more general about relativity than the special relativity theory. So one has low resolution thinking and one has high resolution thinking. Oliver Wendell Home Slice. I feel like Bart Simpson in the Camp Krusty episode, rocking back and forth in my head, in my hands, mumbling, "Build Back Better is coming, Build Back Better is coming." The Queen, the end is slower with Crowder. Sam finally took Emma out before she could finally destroy him. Oh no, please get confirmation Emma is okay. Sam said she's fine, which is suspicious. The 101 on the 5, India Farmers Win. You guys should check out an Indian movie called Jai Bhim Wachin Tamil. It's a great movie which follows a Marxist CPIM, Communist Party of India Marxist, lawyer defending a group of untouchable caste villagers caught up in a police brutality case. Great movie. Per Ulsterholm, you should be considered 3 deuces. Should be considered 3 doses. Yet another PR failure. I'm not sure I know what that refers to. It's always snowing in Ottawa. It's snowing in Ottawa. Shofar me. Also, mad hype. Jamie is on the show today. MR really has been slacking in their solidarity with all the Space and Sea comrades. For the snow, fierce deity.
I think regarding the 2 doses, I think if people just message it as it's going to be 3 doses up top, you wouldn't have some of this, angst about it. But I mean, I feel like this sort of anti-vax stuff was going to be here regardless of how. I mean, missteps are bad, but
I don't think they knew. I mean, I don't think they knew. I just don't think that people's expectations of the understanding of a novel coronavirus a year or 2 out, one which all the people who are studying this stuff also, incidentally, are completely, underwater because of all the other work they have to do. There is such poor, crappy data keeping, particularly in this country. I mean, it's astonishing.
Yeah, and you know what you also won't see is a lot of people updating their lab leak theory videos to go and say, like, actually, it might have been the markets after all, and maybe we jumped the gun a little bit on the lab.
Who knows? I mean, like, but it's so we're so effed, and the expectations, like, there are scenarios where it's just like it's just a coin toss. You just don't know. I mean, it's quite possible we'll need a booster every 6 to 8 months. It's quite possible that once you reach one type of level of spread, that the only opportunity you have at that point is the vaccines become just a way to hold off until we have the therapies that we need and the supplies of therapies that we need to treat this, right away.
Yeah. And also, like,
fierce deity. I definitely didn't have Compromise of 1877 talk with McCarthy on my bingo card. Flare Child, could the post office be expanded to handle email? There is some electronic stuff they could do. New Wrangler, it's like these Republicans are auditioning for Gutfeld or something with lines like, I don't know whether you'd call you professor or comrade. Oof. Maoist Sam Seder, I'm confused. Jared Golden voted against BBB because it included salt, which he says is too much of a giveaway to the rich. But wasn't Golden a member of the Gottheimer 9? Wasn't the whole point of the Gottheimer 9 to sink the BBB unless they take away stuff that helps the poor and replace it with stuff like salt? I am confused by that too. Kudos to Jamie. It's very big of her to invite Sam back onto the Jamerority report after she fired him earlier this year for being too liberal. Here's hoping that we can get more radical voices on this program, such as prominent communist Caleb Maupin and Jimmy Dore, in addition to the militant vegans and anti-natalists. Hassan Pecker. Breaking news from Sweden. Correlation equals causation. Weed scientist, it's embarrassing to say that you want to work in the highest levels of financial regulation and you've never discussed Marx. Jordan Peterson could do a 4-hour lecture on trees and then deny the existence of the forest. Sam, sleep-deprived brain. Sam, have you tried taking omega-3 vitamins an hour or so before you go to sleep? Omega-3 has been shown to show... all right, I'll try it. Omega-3. Grift Christie, how can we get Sam on the Joe Rogan show? Good luck with that.
Get some sort of compromising material on Joe Rogan, maybe?
Yeah, I think that ship passed a long time ago. Grift Christie, these charges were carefully chosen with the high legal bar in mind, Sam. The trial was a farce and a complete joke. John L. Appleseed, happy to say this 2-time MR live show attendee will be, as one TMBS show, will be present in Boston 116. Also joined in part with Sister Ann from Philadelphia and studio mate Maga McCain, a.k.a. Skidmark, both of whom I'm proud to say I introduced to the show. And more importantly, our fellow longtime MR members, looking forward to it as well as making a detour stop at the Worcester, Mass. to visit the excellent art museum there. Good for you. That's pretty good. Know about the Worcester, Mass Museum. It is a pretty good museum. FYI, the antipode, opposite side of the earth from Boston, is Augusta, Western Australia. Australia is so, unless you're a moon rabbit or Martian, that would be the farthest possible place to travel to the Wilbur from the live show. Project Unfuck the World. What up, MR crew? When Obama pops out of the ether, my first thought has always been how pissed away the best opportunity for the real change in my lifetime. But watching his COP26 speech, my first thought was, I wish he would just shut the F up. I can't be by myself in this, or am I alone? No, I felt that too. Sam soft-collared shtick. I read an NPR article that said the comptroller nominee said Republicans are being sexist and racist, undoubtedly. But why say that and let the Republicans scream race card when she could have just said the Republicans are in the pockets of their banker donors? I don't know if they're mutually exclusive. Les, hey, Sam, have you ever thought about listening when you have a guest on? I mean,
think about it.
Well, we got to work on that. Out of state Maina. I love hearing Jamie come back on the show, even if it's her day. I just want to say that you are appreciated, Jamie. I usually credit Michael with pushing me further to the left, but you also played a big part in that. Well, I'm not a commie, but I appreciate the perspective. I have a lot more now. Thank you. Well, hopefully she will hear that. Left-handed stranger. I wanted to call in and chat with y'all, but yesterday I worked from 3 p.m. to 6 a.m. this morning, and the day before 3 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. Tuesday. Love the show. F my sociopathic bosses. Going back to sleep. Please kill me. Aaron is not cool. Hearing Jamie, Sam, and Matt makes me so happy. You guys really helped my sanity do so much during the pandemic. Also, Jamie, can you dom Sam for us? Live free and die. Writing from Canada here, which leaves me very focused on how there was a 17-year-old with an AR-15 in Canada. Owning an AR-15, I believe, is illegal no matter what. Carries a mandatory minimum sentence. The gun is the 99% of the problem here, right? Whose gun is that, and why do they have to say about what happened? I'm not sending 17-year-olds to prison, but this does not feel like justice. Yeah. That of. Great seeing Jamie today. Love you all. Is this me? Thought we could cast Freddie DeBoer out into the cornfield a while ago vis-a-vis false sexual harassment accusation, weird genetic views, etc. Fedora Linux. Communists run Linux. Transistor Radio. Rodeo. Hi, Sam. I'm going home for Thanksgiving next week, and I'm sure my father and I are going to throw down politically sometime during the weekend. One of his favorite arguments is that America isn't a democracy, it's a republic. What would be a good counter argument to have in my political grab bag? That it's not a republic when 40 million people voted more for Democrats than Republicans in a 50-50 Senate. That it's not a republic when 53% of the people vote for Democrats in Wisconsin and they have 35% of the representation. I would argue, like, never mind, it's not a democracy, it's not a republic. Let's see what we got here. Oh, this is good. Did you hear that Boebert thing? She's out of her freaking mind.
Yeah, we played that yesterday.
Okay. Here is Lauren Boebert, congressperson from Colorado. This is really important. And, you know, actually, you wonder, cart before the horse. Colorado is like, it's not teetering in the way that like Virginia is. And I don't think that's a coincidence based upon like sort of like the history of things like racism and whatnot.
Yeah, my understanding is the CRT stuff particularly didn't do terribly well in Colorado.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, I think if there was a way to map, and there probably is, like, what was it, The Roots? What was that book that we had where you could actually see voting patterns based upon the number of slaves to slave owner ratio? Deep Roots, I think it was called. But one wonders if the changes in Colorado bring this about, or what the cause and causation is for a local newscaster to have this sort of revelation and articulate it on local TV in Denver. This is a guy named Kyle Clark. I don't know anything about him, but this is, I think, a very good point. And it's a good point with the Republicans, broadly speaking. And it is a real, regardless of how inept or how ideologically corrupt you perceive the Democrats, there is like a baseline that is not achieved here. And you have polling that showed that like people think that the Democrats have gone further left from the center than the Republicans have gone right from the center. This is a helpful corrective.
It's time that we acknowledge something that may be obvious by now. We hold Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert to a different standard than every other elected official in Colorado. We hold Congresswoman Boebert to a far lower standard. If we held her to the same standard as every other elected Republican and Democrat in Colorado, we would be here near nightly chronicling the cruel, false, and bigoted things that Boebert says for attention and fundraising. This is not about politics, assuming politics is still about things like taxes, national security, healthcare, jobs, and public lands. This is about us, as journalists, recognizing that we'll hold a politician accountable if they say something vile once, but we won't do it if they do it every day. Our double standard is unfair to all the elected officials in Colorado, Republicans and Democrats, who display human decency.
That's about as accurate as you can get. Yeah. Like it's hard to talk about politics when you have that type of dynamic going on.
Very concise and well put, that.
Yeah. Yep. That type of thing is helpful because we're getting more and more of this, right? Like here is Ben Shapiro. Now look, I think there's an argument from a political perspective as to was this the most sort of like effective thing for Democrats to do in censoring Paul Gosar? I don't know. I'm agnostic as to that. On some level, I think there is, I think it's important to say like we shouldn't have lawmakers sort of joke around about killing each other. That's probably unhealthy long term. As a political matter, I also think that Democrats sometimes try and isolate one bad actor as if, on the Republicans, as if they're dispositive, like they're exceptions. Like when the Republicans focus on one Democrat, they're saying that because that Democrat is representative of all the Democrats. When Democrats focus on one Republican, they're saying that guy is out of bounds because even the other Republicans are better than that. But here is Ben Shapiro very upset that Paul Gosar is being censured.
The illusion? It's an anime video. I'm confused. How is that not a joke? Have you ever thrown out an anime video as a very serious point in a debate? Like in a budget debate, do people normally just throw out anime videos of themselves? Badly pixelated, their faces onto anime characters? The illusion that this was just a joke. I love when they pretend they don't understand jokes. That what we say and what we do does not matter so long as we claim a lack of meaning. Now, this nihilism runs deep, says AOC. It conveys and betrays a certain contempt for the meaning and importance of our work here. Okay, let me not betray
have you ever
a lack.
A guy who is more angry at a female politician for just sort of like nothing than Shapiro? He really, I mean, this is going into like, there's something deeper and darker going on with Shapiro here. He is mad. He's mad. She was depicted as being, murdered, but it was only animated. Like, what do you need to do? Like CGI? Like this thing needs to be more serious.
Yeah, it's the form that makes it a joke. Like if it was like a 16 millimeter film, then it's like, oh, I guess it's not a joke because it's 16 millimeter as opposed to anime.
In the wake, we've talked about this many times. Janine Garofalo was one of the few people who was coming out against the war in the early 2000s, against the Iraq War. And in the wake of that, Trey Parker and that other dude, I can't remember their names now. The guys,
Matt Stone.
Matt Stone. They made a movie, these libertarians, and they didn't like the idea how like screechy all the anti-war people were. I haven't heard if they feel bad about this now. But they had a character, like I don't know if it was animated or whatever, I didn't see it, but like a Play-Doh thing, and they blew up Janine. They blew her up. They killed her. I don't know how they killed her. And now there's no code between, it's not really really relevant for the society that comedians show respect to other comedians. But Janina, young cousins and stuff like that once saw it. I mean, they didn't feel too good about that. It was a representation of killing them. I mean, does it matter what the form of representation is? Well, if they had used paper dolls, maybe that's different than anime. It's just language. He just said he wanted to kill her. He didn't actually kill her. I mean, where does it stop? But look how mad Shapiro is.
And these Congress people get threats all the time, Ilhan and AOC particularly.
Do you think if Ben Shapiro got like just a cartoon of his kids being like attacked or run over or something like that?
You could imagine a cartoon made about Ben Shapiro that he would take offense to.
It's just a cartoon, man. It's not real. What? And it's also, let's be clear, there is no doubt, and look, it happens to people. Like I get death threats. People get death threats. I can't imagine the amount of death threats that AOC gets, and how to have a sitting congressperson validate these type of things, what that must do.
After they're validating all the Jan 6 stuff for the previous 8 months.
Exactly. All right, continue. Let's hear Ben Shapiro blow his stack.
Claim a lack of meaning. Now, this nihilism runs deep, says AOC. It conveys and betrays a certain contempt for the meaning and importance of our work here. Okay, let me not betray a lack of contempt for. I have contempt for the meaning of your work here. All of you in Congress. I think that you're basically useless. I think you do nothing for a living and get paid on the taxpayer dime, and then claim that you're changing the world while wrecking America's fiscal future. So let me just put that one out there. But it betrays contempt for.
Somehow they managed to do nothing, but also wreck America's fiscal future. So they do nothing, and their nothingness brings about a wreck of American fiscal future, which at least he believes in the need for an activist government. We may disagree on how that government functions. This guy's such a clown show, too. It's unbelievable. There's not even a consistency within like 5 words that they express. Any given phrase completely undercuts the point they're trying to make. All right, continue.
Do nothing for a living and get paid on the taxpayer dime, and then claim that you're changing the world while wrecking America's fiscal future. So let me just put that one out there. But it betrays contempt for the meaning of the work that we do here. That's what we do. So long as we claim it's a joke, it doesn't matter. That's what we say. That what we say here doesn't matter. That our actions every day as elected leaders don't matter. And I am here to rise to say it does. She said, our work here matters. Our example matters. There's meaning in our service. Vomit.
Look at philosophy.
Come on. You don't have to like Paul Gosar or even like that he tweeted out a dumb meme to understand that's not a death threat that violates the sanctity of the United States Congress. And these people are so irritating. You're making me defend Paul Gosar now. What the wrong with you people? Seriously, what?
You're making me defend. You're making me do it.
Remember when people made him defend Steve King as not racist also, and he had to kind of back off of that?
You're making it easy to make him do things. Unbelievable. This guy really.
It is like, I'm also, I'm going to be 33, I think now. But Ben Shapiro,
vomit. like he's still 7. That's the problem. He started when he was very young, and sometimes like you get arrested
Exactly, right? Like Charlie Kirk is aging out of the like I'm the young conservative thing. Ben Shapiro is going to be more visibly that too, and he also has been doing this since he was like 12. And I don't know what like psychologically that's going to do to him.
Well, I think the problem is that when you develop those habits at age 12, and the forum doesn't change. And then the other part is that he's not nearly as entertaining as he thinks he is. Yes. And that is, I think, something that he's struggled with for a long time. Like he so badly wanted to be a comedy writer and to do film. And I mean, he's done this.
Yeah, because
signing actors who are like,
it's like child actor syndrome. Like,
yeah, exactly.
You haven't had to actually develop the chops because people were just clapping for you.
Yep. And that can go both ways. I knew a couple of people who were child actors as adults. Some of them did okay. The other ones end up, with a problem. All I can hope is
Hopefully
that
they didn't inspire any mosque shootings, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just there's absolutely it's unbelievable. You would think he would be a little bit sensitive to that too after his stuff being quoted by someone who used it as justification for going killing people. Yeah, I think. Whatever. That's the thing that got him so pissed about the nihilism. He didn't like to hear that nihilism knocked in any way.
Hey, that's my audience.
Hey, wait a second. That's how that nihilism paid for my house.
Yeah, do you think somebody can listen to me for 3 hours a day and not being nihilistic?
I got news for you. The reason why that my pool is warm is because of that. Mark the shark. It's not racism that pits against groups against each other. It's the response to racism. Yeah, exactly. That's the Jordan Peterson line. They're making me defend Paul Gosar. They're making me be racist by saying that it's racism. Matt, I remember Bill Maher vividly, says Jonathan Armstead. That Bill Maher episode. It was Gene Simmons, Whoopi, and Hitchens. Whoopi did a great defense of communism.
And Dennis Prager.
Each according to their need. And Hitchens, back before the booze addled his brain, did a great takedown of Henry Kissinger.
I mean, he's still probably drunk in this appearance, but this is before 9/11 happened, at least.
Well, he was drunk, but he didn't have the real rot.
Right.
Tucker Carlson, Sam, I've gotten my booster shot. What's your favorite sexual position? Champagne Commie. Sam, I know you're not a communist, but do you love communism? And are there any communists that you have loved in your long lifespan? I got to be honest with you. I don't even think I had an opportunity to date a communist. When I was younger, people did not identify as a communist. I just never. Michael from Bavaria. You're making me hit myself. Ben Shapiro. There's no such thing as wokeism, only individual instances of wokeness. I know, it's just so crazy. Democracies are a form of republics. Republics just mean the power is derived from the people, in contrast to the monarchies, for example, where power is derived from God choosing the monarch. All right, 5 more. Science people for 3. Oh, for hour 3. Some good news. Apparently 98.5% of all Americans over 65 are vaccinated. Indeed. Soft-boiled detective. I wonder if these pundits think about their level of guilt when they see articles of people regretting not getting vaccine and dying. What's your armchair quarterback guess as to when Dems will get new House and Senate leadership? I think, Senate leadership, I think it's going to be another 8 years. House leadership, I think that, Pelosi, maybe 2 more years. Maybe. She's going to hang in there until she can pick her person. Mailman Paul, would Shapiro be okay with an anime that was anti-Semitic? It's just a depiction. It's not like the Nazis ever just used animation in any way.
Yeah, make an anime where you send all the Daily Wire people to some sort of gas chamber and see.
Oh my God, Bronx guy. Hey, leftists, today is a good day for you to accept that there are white folks who want Medicare for all and support Kyle Rittenhouse. Leave them. My Ben Dixon quote. Okay, one more I am. The final I am. Of the day, of the week. Cosmo Possum. Let me call in. I can explain the difference between general and special relativity. That will have to wait until Monday. Matt, Bradley, Emma, in abstention, great job today and this week. We'll see you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice is made, for the option where you don't get paid.